Our last session is on meaningful attention, the complexity of human perception, how attention measurement has evolved over time. With me is Jeff Bander, Chief Revenue Officer for I USA, and Matthias Rothensee, Ph.D., Chief Scientific Officer and Partner, I. Gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We've all gone to a lot of these presentations, which have been awesome. Especially, I like the ones at the beginning. We're talking about trying to get everyone to agree on a currency, which could be quite interesting when if and ever it ever happens. Hopefully, it will. But attention is a hot topic. There's attention conventions, and what we really think that a lot of the metrics that are being used now to say what attention is, it's not enough. And what I mean by that, we want to share with you what we think is the next step in making it meaningful. Meaningful can mean different things to different people. And our goal today is to really push that a little higher, not just simple attention, but what is meaningful. Meaningful can be selling something, meaningful being someone signing up, some sort of action, some sort of a desired goal that's hit. So when we talk about what's meaningful, it should be important, it should be focused, it should be purposeful, processed deeply, and it should be effective. And when I say effective to have a goal. We always have, when we're doing a market research, we want to begin with the end in mind. What are we trying to achieve here? What is the goal? And kind of reverse engineer to get to that. And we have engagement, processing of stimuli, better comprehension and retention. You're aligned with your goal, your attention. Like, for example, I'm waving my hand right now. If anyone's looking here, I have your attention. Not very meaningful. So we have to make sure that the goal that we're trying to achieve is achieved to make it meaningful. We have if we're going to make it into a formula, we call it System 0, and we'll get into what that means. Make System 1 and System 2 insights help you get your desired action, get to your desired goal. System 0, our CEO came up with the term, and it's a brilliant term. We call it perception. The environment that you're seeing, whatever you're seeing in, the more real it is. And if you can do it in an environment where the consumers don't even know it's being tested, your System 1 and System 2 insights are going to be meaningful. And we think that's critically important when you're doing any testing to have that perception as real and natural as the real world. So the question goes, how are we going to measure on a more practical level what's meaningful? I'm just going to do a few short slides here. When we talk about the hierarchy of attention, I just waved my arms and got people's attention. Motion is a very good way to get attention. You obviously need a lot more. Here's some good examples of novelty with the Nemo, the lawnmowers. They get attention. But if that's all they get, they may win awards. But the whole idea usually, and I'm gonna say usually, is they want to sell something. Why do people advertise? They usually want to sell something. So that should, a lot of times, is the goal. Another thing, how our brain works. If I'm smiling like this, no one has to guess that I'm happy. This, no one has to guess. But when you have an ambiguous face, the brain will spend more time looking at it, trying to decipher what's going on in that face. And I think a really good example is the Mona Lisa. I think if we had people write down what she's thinking, we get a lot of different opinions because it's very ambiguous. This is just a way to get attention. Again, not meaningful, but it is attention. Another is the pop-out effect. Pop-out, as you can see, it will get attention. But and when we're going to get, Matthias is going to get more into the meaningful part. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the attention part. Is we have to tie this attention into what's meaningful. And I'm going to hand it over to Matthias. I'll come back at the end, and he's going to get into adding the next step. I want to just add one more thing because we do have that time. 1947, there was a book written by a guy named Percy Whiting. It's actually the book that they've been using for a long time at Dale Carnegie, and it talks about connecting with people. And the first step is attention. If you don't have attention, you have nothing else. The next step is interest. If you get attention, then you have to get interest. Then you want to get conviction that what you're talking about convinces people that it's real. The next is desire. You build a desire and then you do business. I recommend it. It's an old book, but it's still being used all over the world. But those steps are really important. Matthias is going to talk from here.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So what do we need in order to measure meaningful attention? We need two components, right? We need a decent methodology of measuring eye tracking, gaze behavior, attention, whatever. So we at iSquare, we employ various methods to do so. We use smartphone-based eye tracking, so the front-facing cameras of your smartphones. We use head-mounted systems that look like a pair of glasses. We use webcams, desktop-based hardware, eye trackers, or virtual reality eye tracking. All this helps us to have a decent, accurate, noise-free signal that shows us the scan path of human attention, so to say. And the second component, Jeff already mentioned it, is that we have an authentic media exposition when it comes to consumer behavior. So what we call this live in context testing. We provide a range of different platforms where we integrate advertising as an experimental technique. So we have all these platforms available, a range of formats on these platforms. And what we can do is we inject advertising that we are interested in testing in. We create experimental variations, some test groups with different exposure schemes, with different creatives being exposed, and we measure differences between them. It's a streamlined process. It's very simple. There's no app download needed, anything like that. It's integrated in our survey platform. And people walk just through, they get an instruction which is not focused on advertising at all, but rather explore the platform. They can share, comment, like, whatever you can do on these platforms, and we integrate the advertising here. And what results from that, we conduct a number of studies every year, and we gain a lot of insight, of course, big pile of data in front of us. And so this enables us to conduct meta-analysis and to have a look at what are the general patterns of attention that emerge from this big pile of data. And I show you first an initial analysis. You see here the attention span on the x-axis and the percentage of viewers who spend so much seconds to watch an advertising. And what emerges here is, of course, the general insight that attention spans are very short. Like if you are looking for consumers who spend more than 8 seconds with your advertising, that's a very tiny fraction. It's 10% of your audience, not more. And there's a steep decay already in the first second. So general wisdom is you have very little time to spend with your consumers. They take only very little time to digest your advertising message. And that sounds like sad news at first sight. But the good news, on the other hand, is when we plot this against ad impact, you see here on the y-axis, we have the recognition rate. It's a typical indicator of ad impact. We see that there's a steep increase in the first 2.5 seconds of attention. So it makes a lot of difference whether you have your consumers spend 1 or 2 seconds with your advertising, as opposed to whether they spend 10 or 12 seconds. You see the curve levels off, so there's not much difference between 10 and 12 seconds, but between 1 and 2 seconds, there's a big difference. And now these 2.5 seconds, they play a big role in our interpretation. And the question is, how can you make consumers spend as much time as possible with your advertising? This, of course, depends on the advertising itself. So the creative factor plays a big role. We saw this in the TikTok presentation a few minutes ago before the lunch break, that the creation itself plays a big role. But it's also, of course, the media platform. And what we can do with our eye tracking solution is that we compare different media platforms. You see here results of a case study that we did, where we measured eye tracking on smartphone devices using front-facing cameras, and we compared as an example for today Instagram and YouTube. What we see here, the numbers. Let's have a look at the green numbers first. Is that at first sight, Instagram does not get so much attention when it comes to average gaze duration on advertising. You see 1.6 seconds, and compared to YouTube, YouTube is much better off in getting more attention. They have 3.6 seconds average gaze duration. That sounds like, oh, that's a good result for YouTube. But let's have a look at the blue bubbles. The blue bubbles, again, are the recognition rate, the conversion into ad effectiveness. And what we see here is that Instagram does convert the little attention that they get much more effectively into an ad impact than YouTube does. And of course, there's the question arises, how can this be? Isn't this a linear relationship? We would say no, there is no linear relationship between attention and effectiveness on the other hand. And this might have to do with the exposure situation. Yeah, right. In this newsfeed based medium like Instagram, we're talking about voluntary attention. People stay with the advertising because they find something interesting and they watch it all the way through, or at least a few seconds. And on YouTube, it's to a certain amount, it's forced exposure. Like we have involuntary attention. And we think that the connection to meaningful attention is that these are different qualities of attention. It's not the same attention that we are talking about, right? And we, of course, take it also a step further. What are the results of the attention when we connect the exposure on the media platforms with shopping behavior as a next step? You see this in the middle of this chart here, that we are also connecting ad exposure with shopping experience in simulated shopping environments. We have Amazon here displayed, but we also feature Walmart and a number of other platforms. And we can measure when people had an ad contact on a given social media platform, what is the effect that we can measure on the e-commerce platform. Maybe if there has been an ad exposure, people stay longer on the search results page, displaying the product that has been advertised in the first step. Maybe they have a higher percentage of looking at the product detail page, or even a higher percentage of putting the product into the basket. These are all behavioral effects that we are able to measure with our test solution. Yeah, and with that, we want to close with some closing remarks about meaningful attention. So we are trying to find out what is the difference between worthless and valuable attention. You've seen a case study today demonstrating that attention is not attention, that there are differences between types of attention. We're disentangling worthless versus valuable. And also, of course, thinking about the distinction between consequential and inconsequential attention. Some attention moments, like Jeff waving in front of you, you might have a bit of attention for a second, but there's no consequence as a result of that. But maybe when you have seen the presentation today, you have paid a lot of attention. Thank you for that. And maybe this has also gained some momentum with you. Maybe you got more interested. You can come up with and ask us questions, talk to us about this. And then this is, of course, a different type of attention that we have here. And also from a user's perspective, also from your perspective as our audience today, it has to do with, is this wasted time in the eyes of the audience, or is it time well spent? And with that, I hand back to Jeff for a final wrap-up.
I want to just go back just for a second, because one thing that you're seeing in more and more companies, their number one goal is, and we find that is one of the meaningful goals that people have when they're advertising, is it going to drive sales? And this add to cart is one of the ways we're seeing a lot of people find out, okay, we learned that attention is being spent on social media, but is it meaningful being in this case, is it turning to people want to buy the product. The takeaways, wanted to share, you should begin with the end in mind. A lot of times people are doing the same thing over and over again. We live in a time of very fast changes with technology, ideas, and always question whatever you're doing, because there may be a different angle, different way to do it. So begin with the end in mind and reverse engineer it. Start with what the goal is and always tie attention and meaning to what the goal is. And we're going to end with that. Any questions? We thank you very much.
Thanks, Beth. We have a couple of minutes for questions if there are any questions. Several questions. See, we have a mic floating around.
I was curious about the eye tracking. And so you showed the two different ads, one on Instagram, one on YouTube. And the one on YouTube had the skip ad button that shows up on YouTube. In your experience with the eye tracking, do you notice that people's gaze goes to the skip button when that button comes up?
Yeah, definitely. We notice this behavior when the skip button is activated. If there's a skippable ad, then people look at the skip button in order to actually perform the behavior. Yeah.
That's another reason why it's important when you look at comparing to something else. The time can be skewed because of that.
Yeah.
We can actually test both ways, with and without. But exactly.
Hi, in your studies, have you noticed that there are any differences in trends in like the eye tracking behavior? Like if you were to compare across gender or age or cultures, or is meaningful attention kind of universal?
Meaningful attention is going to be different. Not in every way, but there's different genders will look at things differently, ages look at things differently, cultures will look at things differently, different parts of the country will look at things differently, and that's why people do different cells based on, again, what's the goal? What is the main goal? And the goal can be we want to target X, Y, and Z, these three people. So when you do it, you do see the differences.
There's, for instance, maybe another note on that. There's a big difference between younger audiences and older audiences. Younger audiences are much faster to perceive things. They have more rapid behavior, so to say. And there's also a cultural difference, especially between Eastern Asian countries and Western countries. That is even more dramatic with regard to magnitude of difference.
Nope. Thanks, guys. Very informative.